Now I want to go from the bees dying to our children who are being baptized in this new Earth First death cult. Basically, we have these upper crust level educators, thinkers, scientists, Earth worshipers who think humans are bad. And their mission, instead of just doing away with themselves, and if humans are such a bad problem, go on off yourself. No, they want to tell us that we're bad for the earth and we basically need to die. They don't come out and say it like that every time, though. They don't come out and say you need to die. They like to approach it from this educational standpoint, wearing a blazer with the elbow pads, just talking in nice, gentle terms, and how it's overpopulation and we've developed equations. So we're going to get into that. And there it is, Time Magazine, How to Die. Wow, look at that. Guys are on the ball. So it's all about training the young people to hate themselves and to hate life and to hate technology and to hate success. And it's to get you in that mindset of wanting to be a slave. And we've got a great example of that we're going to come up with and show you in a second. But first, I want to go to a clip of Al Gore, and this is from 2009, where he was talking to the kids, getting them prepared to become good little green police. Let's go to that clip.
There are some things about our world that you know that older people don't know.
He goes on to say and equate that our generation told our parents that it was wrong to have segregation, which it is. And what he's trying to do later, because this is a climate change conference, he's trying to equate racism with this fake climate change agenda he's pushing. And that because you're smart and we're giving you privileged information on the inside, that now you know stuff your parents don't know. And we're going to see more of this. You need to tell your parents to stop driving, to change their light bulbs, to change their toilets. All this stuff happens, and it slowly creeps through. Well, back in 2008, and there was a TV network that told kids how long their carbon footprint should be to allow them to live. There's that full screen right there, and it was a video game, and it's got a little piggy on it, and it says, find out when you should die. And this is a little game for kids. So it goes on to say, how big of a greenhouse pig are you? Click on the question numbers across the top and select your answer for each one. The Australian average answer is indicated. With each answer, see how your CO2 production compares to the average Aussie greenhouse pig and the environmentally sustainable green pig. And when you're done, click on the skull and crossbones to find out what age you should die so you don't use more than your fair share of Earth's resources. So they're indoctrinating the little kids into this mindset of, oh, if you have a pool or if you have a big car, you're a greenhouse pig and therefore you should die. Well, now let's move into this week. Urian Bassan wrote an article titled, UC Professor Eyes Permanent Sterilant to Cull U.S. Population. And it goes on to talk about this University of California Riverside professor, Richard Cardullo, was talking about gossypol and the derivative used of it being a sterilant and the World Health Organization and all this other stuff. But what was interesting, and I watched not all the video, I skipped the first part of the question and answer. I watched a little bit of it. Basically, he got into science, he was into physics, and then he went to Harvard, one of these upper crust schools. And there he learned that humans were bad, and he started studying basically the effects of reproduction and population. And so his job now is to go around and tell kids that the earth is overpopulated and that steps need to be taken. And he puts it in terms that the kids can understand that if their generation is going to be part of the solution, then they need to just stop having children and start practicing birth control and hell, maybe even get sterilized. So we're going to go to a few clips that I cut out of this. It was an over-hour presentation, and we're going to analyze each one. Each one's maybe about 20 seconds long. First one, he's going to talk about Thomas Malthus. And if you've listened to Tarpley, you've heard the term Malthusian. Well, this is where it comes from. Here's that clip.
Robert Malthus was a very famous British economist and clergyman, and he argued that the population would inevitably increase faster than the food supply unless it's kept in check by things like famine, disease, and war. His ideas actually gained a lot of support, and he actually wanted to use his arguments to limit food supplies so that, you know, we could control populations.
Control populations. That's what it's all about. It's just, you know, we're going to limit the food supply so people starve, and that's how we're going to control population. Well, let's go to some quotes from Malthus. This first one's about the plague. Instead of recommending cleanliness to the poor, we should encourage contrary habits. In our towns, we should make the streets narrower, crowd more people into the houses, and court the return of the plague. In the country, we should build our villages near stagnant pools, and particularly encourage settlement in all marshy and unwholesome situations. There's Sir Thomas Malthus. That's what he thinks of humanity. He's a real smart man. And by the way, the people he influenced were people like Charles Darwin and others like that, basically the fathers, the grandfathers of the eugenics movement. Here's another quote from Malthus. All children who are born beyond what would be required to keep up the population to a desired level must necessarily perish, unless room can be made for them by death of a grown person. We should facilitate instead of foolishly and vainly endeavoring to impede the operations of nature in producing this morality. That was from his essays on the principles of population. Here's another one from Malthus. The power of population is indefinitely greater than the power in the earth to produce sustenance for man. Well, since Malthus's time, we've proven that we could make our agricultural standards better, use irrigation techniques, use retention ponds, all kind of things. They grow crops out in Egypt now. And you know how they do it? They put black plastic down and they water them underneath the black plastic. And that keeps it basically humid underneath there. How do I know this? Well, one of my relatives is a farmer who went from Michigan all the way to Egypt to learn how they farm in the desert. And now he's grown his crops to greater levels. And so we have the technology, and anytime the human race has come up to a problem, we can find ways around it. Usually we don't, we resort to war, but there's a lot of great things that we have created, and when pushed in the right directions, we can make these things happen for the betterment of man. Now let's move on. He also introduces the young middle schoolers to Paul and Anne Ehrlich. Let's see what he has to say about them.
These are very famous people, especially in the 1970s. Paul and Anne Ehrlich are scientists and faculty members at Stanford University, and they were interested in the effect of populations on the environment. So they came up with a very simple relationship, which is I equals PAT. It's called the IPAT formula. And simply what this says is that the environmental impact, okay, is going to be affected by, first of all, the population size, second of all, by the affluence. So for instance, if you want to minimize environmental impact, perhaps you should consider lowering your standard of living, for instance.
Oh, you see, if we all live in slums, then we could have more people. But that's the only way we could have more people in this world, is if we all live in 16 by 16 apartments. Oh, remember that report Melissa Melton did? That's right. That's what they're trying in New York. 16 by 16 square apartments where you can live like a prisoner. And if you do that, well, then we can have a few more people. But if you don't, then your affluence is too high, and you're a greenhouse piggy, and you must be killed, and find out when you should die. So this all starts when they're young. It starts with coloring books about polar bears and about dolphins and penguins and how they're all endangered from evil man. And yes, there is a lot of pollution going on in the world. But guess what? It's not me doing it. It's not you doing it. It's these giant corporations that are beholden to no one. Like, didn't we just cover Bayer spraying chemicals that are killing the bees? Oh, wait, I'm not spraying the chemicals unless I use them myself and I buy them. So I'm actually am doing my part to kill the bees, and in a sick way. But I really don't. I don't use anything. When I have ants or anything like that in my yard, I use hot water or boric acid, which is benign. But It's neither here nor there. We have more clips to go through. This guy is not done. I mean, he brainwashed these kids hardcore for an hour. Let's look at some Paul Ehrlich quotes. When an area overpopulated, when is an area overpopulated? When its population can't be maintained without rapidly depleting non-renewable resources. By this standard, the entire planet and virtually every nation is already vastly overpopulated. Wow. Even though there's enough room in Texas to give everybody an acre of land in the entire world and live on it. So how are we overpopulated? Oh, well, Paul doesn't want to answer that. He was too busy writing books in the 70s about population booms and how we were going to have these massive catastrophes. And it seems like those catastrophes do end up happening, but only after they're engineered, only after control of resources is instituted, usually by these giant NGOs, World Health Organization, Rockefeller Foundation funded groups come in and want to control things. And that's when you have famines. That's when you have genocides. Let's go to another Ehrlich quote. The development of a long-term sterilization capsule that could be implanted under the skin and removed when pregnancy is desired opens additional possibilities for coercive fertility control. The capsule could be implanted at puberty and might be removable with official permission for a limited number of births. And he wrote that along with John Holdren in Ecoscience. And if you're a member of PrisonPlanet.tv, you can go to an interview we did with Tarpley in our special report section, and it basically covers Ecoscience from front to back, mainly centers around Holdren because he was the science czar, but both Paul and Ann Ehrlich helped write the book. So these people are basically peas in a pod. Got one more Ehrlich quote. A cancer is an uncontrolled multiplication of cells. The population explosion is an uncontrolled multiplication of people. We must shift our efforts from the treatment of the symptom to the cutting out of the cancer. The operation will demand many apparently brutal and heartless decisions. That's Paul Ehrlich in The Population Bomb. It's a book he wrote in the 70s talking about overpopulation then when we had about 4.5 to 5 billion people. Well, now we have 7. But actually, the increase of population is slowing down, and plenty of people have said that it's going to peak at about 9 billion and then start going down. Now, there is a problem with this. There is a problem with the population going down, because what that means is there's less young people to take care of the old people, and then you have a crisis there, which we're already seeing now, because there's a lot more baby boomers than there are people my age, and the people in the generation behind me. A lot more baby boomers, and they're going to take a lot of resources to care for, and which we could come up with problems for, but instead we're just going to run around and talk about how bad it is to get old or be young or to have children and to get people into this Hunger Games mentality. Let's move on. We got a lot more clips to go through with Professor Cardullo. Let's see what else he has to say. Here's the next clip.
We wanted to decrease our population. Okay, so let's decrease our impact on the environment. If we simply decreased the consumption of environmental resources by 5%. So you go home tonight and you tell your parents, what if we cut down our gasoline consumption just 5%? In the next few years. Can we do that?
Yeah. See, remember Al Gore? There's things that you know that your parents don't know. That's right. If we could just get our kids to start telling us what to do and running our lives, everything would be great. And that would solve all our problems, because we've got the kids into this environmental fanaticism. Let's go on to the next clip.
So you can do a lot with these two, but ultimately the argument is we've got to do something about population as well. What about the United States? We're very affluent. You've seen many examples of that. The Earth at nighttime should have convinced you of that. We currently have a population of 313 million people. Okay? If we want to take the population down to 150 million, okay, all it would require in the next 100 years is to lower that birth rate. Okay?
So he's not saying go out and kill people. He's just saying, you know, lower the birth rate, which what they talk about in Ecoscience is through sterilization and forced abortion and contraceptive use against your will, anything basically to keep people from breeding. So, you know, he's proposing, in order to not harm the environment, to cut our birth rate down in half, and that would thereby bring us to about 150 million people instead of 20 or 30 million people where we're at. Very dangerous ideas indeed, but he's planting these seeds into these young minds, and these kids are going to go around and regurgitate this later, and they're going to think this is true. And then they're not going to want to have families, but that'll be okay. It's for the earth. And then the only people that are having kids are people like Mr. Cardullo who are out there. They're going to have kids. Ted Turner has 5 kids. Oh, but they're all grown now, so it's different. You know, we had to create these rules now because now we see the problems. Let's go to the next clip.
Okay. That means your generation and the next generation, if they're committed to doing this, it would mean having family sizes that on the average are 1.5 children per family. Some would have 2, some would have 1, about 50-50. That would mean we could decrease our population by about half and hopefully maintain our standard of living. That's what that means.
So we have to get rid of half the population in order to keep our standard of living, according to some crazy people who in the 70s wrote we were already at a population crisis. What happened 30, 40 years later? We're still here. There is no population crisis. The crisis is with these people going around brainwashing our young children. But did you see how he's doing it? It's going to be up to you guys out there. It's going to be your problem. It's not talking about the debt or the endless wars that we're fighting. No, no, no. It's all about the population. That's the only problem. Let's go to the next clip.
Now, if we want to decrease the population, we can do it a number of different ways. I'm going to show you the thing that affects populations more than anything, and it's something I've already shown you one picture of. It's those. Okay? Sperm is a vector which ultimately leads to, and so do eggs, lead to increased population.
There you go. So how do we attack population? We attack it at the source. We go after the men, we go after the young women, we make them infertile. And he goes on to talk about cottonseed oil, which they figured out in China was a natural sterilant. People cooked with cottonseed oil, they didn't have as many kids. And so they basically stuck the World Health Organization and a bunch of Rockefeller-funded groups. We actually covered this in a couple of Yuri and Masson articles, how they were in the 60s and 70s funding experiments and working with Gossipol, also known as cottonseed oil, to create male infertility pills. The problem is if you take more than 10 times the recommended dose for infertility, you die. Well, I guess that's another way to end the population. Let's go to this last clip.
So many scientists want to know, are there ways, are there new ways that we can control population or fertility rates by targeting specific cells, sperm or eggs, okay, so that individuals can make the decision to keep those rates low.
There it is. And it's all done in a nice, calm, simpering way. They put it in the textbooks, they put it in the TV shows, they put it in your Happy Meals. Anywhere they can put the information to make kids feel bad about themselves, they put it out there. Oh, and then we have back in March an Anthony Gucciardi article, medical journalist calls for afterbirth abortion, says infants aren't people. And very interesting article there, saying that newborn babies simply do not have a moral right to life. And it talks about a eugenics program where 60,000 people were forcibly sterilized in 1929 by the U.S. government. So essentially, these people, starting with Malthus, have started creating this mindset that humans are bad and there's too many humans and we need to get rid of them. And they do this by brainwashing our children because they know they're not going to get older people, because older people have experienced life, and the brainwashing wasn't there when I was a kid. There was stuff about recycling, and that was the start of it, and Earth Day. And it slowly creeps. Now it's light bulbs. Now it's too much gasoline. Now we have to take electric cars that our government subsidizes or use solar, which I'm all for. I'm all for putting research into stuff like that instead of killing. If we could take the money away from killing people, killing brown people and dirt farmers in Afghanistan, and putting it towards solar research, we could be powering everything. But we don't want to do that. We're more interested in culling the population, controlling resources, and dumbing people down. That seems to be our industrial efforts. So there was my, somewhat veiled attempt to get you people out there to recognize that this is going on, and we need to stop. We need to combat this mind control with positivity and love, and let kids know that we need more kids, more healthy kids, more unvaccinated kids, more kids who aren't eating GMOs, more kids who aren't sitting in front of the television, more kids who are playing. That's what we need to make a better Earth. We don't need less people. More people is what's going to make it better, because many hands make light work, as they say.
Alex Jones here with a message that could revolutionize health in this country. Going back about 1.5 years ago, I began to learn about the incredible health effects of Youngevity products. Aaron Dykes lost 92 pounds. We're going to show you some before and afters. Aaron, break down what happened, your story.
I've worked really hard with diet and exercise to try to lose weight, but I just didn't get the results. It just didn't happen. Then I saw what you were doing with InfoWarsTeam.com. I wasn't even trying to lose weight, but I got it because I wanted to feel better energy. I wanted that nutrition. Didn't even understand how that could kickstart my own weight loss goals, but the products did that for me. I found myself suddenly losing weight, more energetic, wanting to exercise, wanting to eat the right foods.
And they don't even advertise it as weight loss. I want to challenge our radio listeners to go to InfoWarsTeam.com, sign up as a distributor, and get wholesale pricing discounts at InfoWarsTeam.com.